Ever loved so hard at 16 your heart and hormones teamed up and staged a full-blown rebellion? It was just another Friday afternoon at Westfield High, a school where everything was either dramatic or completely boring. But for 16-year-old Ella Monroe, it felt like everything changed the moment she saw him. Jackson Wilde wasn't the stereotypical bad boy. He wasn't a jock or some rebellious, misunderstood kid. But there was something magnetic about him. Maybe it was the way his tousled hair framed his face like it didn't care, or how his grin always seemed to promise a little more than it let on. Jackson was different. And Ella, well, Ella was the kind of girl who never expected to catch someone's attention just like his. But somehow she did. It started like any other high school crush, casual glances in the hallways, half laughing during class, finding any excuse to bump into him between periods. They were nothing more than strangers when their paths first crossed. Ella was the girl who always sat quietly in the back of class, scribbling in her notebook, dreaming of something more than the high school halls she knew all too well. And then, one fateful Thursday after school, Jackson sat beside her in the lunchroom. "Hey, you want to play Fortnite with me and the guys this weekend?" Jackson asked casually, looking at her through his messy, half-wild curls. Ella blinked. "Fortnite?" "Yeah," he smirked. "You know, battle royales and building chaos? My friends and I are dropping in for squads. You in?" "I've never played before," she admitted, slightly embarrassed, though a smile tugged at her lips. Jackson laughed, and for a moment, Ella's heart fluttered. "Well, we'll make a gamer out of you then. I promise no one's gonna judge you. You're just one of us." And just like that, Ella was thrust into Jackson's world. She had no idea what she was doing. The controller felt awkward in her hands, and the fast-paced action on screen had her both laughing and shouting in confusion. But there was something about him, that made her want to keep playing, to keep learning. Jackson's friends were loud, playful, but most of all, kind. They didn't mock her for not knowing the game. Instead, they showed her the ropes, teaching her how to build, survive, and get that victory royale while Jackson grinned beside her. By the end of the weekend, they were closer. And something about Jackson, his easy smile, his confidence, the way he made everything seem like a fun adventure, began to draw Ella in. It wasn't just gaming anymore. It was everything about him, how he'd bring her a cup of coffee when she was studying late, or how he'd always walk her to class, even if it meant cutting across the whole campus. They were falling in love in a way that felt effortless. At 16, emotions ran hot and fast. Ella was no stranger to the way her body reacted when Jackson was near the racing heart, the flutter in her stomach, the way her skin felt too sensitive in the best and most confusing ways. There were moments when just his hand brushing hers felt like static lightning through her veins. The raging hormones between them were impossible to ignore, and Ella didn't always know what to do with the whirlwind of feelings they stirred. It was thrilling. It was terrifying. And most of all, it was new. The first time Ella kissed Jackson was unexpected. It wasn't like anything she imagined. It wasn't a sweet moment in a secluded corner or a gentle moment with a slow build-up. It was a flash of heat that took her by surprise. It started with them sitting in his bedroom, just like any other afternoon. The air was thick with the lingering smell of pizza, the remnants of their gaming session scattered around them, controllers, snacks, and the faint hum of music playing in the background. "I swear you're not even trying to beat me," Jackson teased, his voice light as he tossed a pillow at her. Ella laughed, throwing it back, but her heart was racing. Her fingers brushed his, just for a second, but it felt like an electric spark shot up her arm. She turned to face him fully, her chest tightening as their gazes locked. Jackson's expression softened, his playful smirk fading into something more intense. He reached for her, slowly at first, as if he wasn't sure what was about to happen. She didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned in, drawn to him like a magnet. The distance between them seemed to shrink in an instant. And then his lips were on hers. The kiss was anything but tentative. It was hungry, urgent. Jackson's hands found her waist, pulling her closer as she let herself sink into him. Ella's pulse quickened as she kissed him back, a flood of new emotions crashing through her like a wave. There was a desperation in the way they kissed, a need to feel each other that neither had anticipated. Jackson's lips trailed to her neck, his breath warm against her skin as his hands roamed, exploring her like she was something he wanted to memorize. Ella's head spun. Every touch, every shift of his body against hers felt electric. She wanted more. She needed more. She gasped as his lips found hers again, deeper this time, the kiss slow and deliberate. His hands slipped beneath the fabric of her shirt, sending a thrill through her body. Ella wasn't sure where her nervousness went. All she knew was the way her heart pounded as she pressed herself closer to him. There was no doubt in her mind anymore. This feeling was real. She pulled away just enough to catch her breath, their foreheads pressed together, a shared moment of vulnerability. "Are you sure about this?" Jackson asked softly, his voice rough. Ella's answer was a quiet kiss, as if it spoke louder than words ever could. She was sure. And for the first time in a long time, she felt completely alive, completely herself. The days that followed were nothing like Ella had expected. She wasn't just falling in love with Jackson, she was discovering herself in ways she never had before. It wasn't just about stolen moments and passion, it was about finding a new kind of comfort with someone who made her feel seen. It was the first time she truly felt wanted, not just for who she was on the surface, but for everything she was becoming. Every touch, every kiss with Jackson felt like a milestone, a new chapter of her life. And maybe it was the first time she wasn't scared of the changes happening to her, of the growing feelings in her chest. But those feelings were not without complications. The whispers between friends, the shared glances when they thought she wasn't looking, it was all part of the high school world they lived in. And even though they had their disagreements, even though the world sometimes seemed like it wanted to pull them apart, there was no doubt in her mind about one thing. Jackson was hers. One Friday night, a few weeks into their relationship, Jackson was doing what he did best, gaming with his friends. Ella sat on the couch beside him, her head resting against his shoulder as the sounds of gunfire and chaos from Fortnite blared from the TV. She had always known Jackson's friends came first, and while it never bothered her, she had to admit it was sometimes a bit of a longing sigh that escaped her lips when they were all wrapped up in the chaos of the game. Jackson, fully engrossed in a match, glanced over at her, his brow furrowing. "You okay?" Ella nodded, though the corners of her lips curled downward. "I'm fine. Just, don't mind me." But Jackson was no fool. He knew her better than that. "Wanna join in?" he offered, handing her a second controller. She shook her head, still sighing. "I don't think I'll ever get the hang of it. I like just being here with you." And it was true. She loved the way he made her feel, even when he wasn't paying attention to her every second. It was the unspoken comfort of being with someone, knowing that even in their world of noise and chaos, she was right where she belonged. One thing led to another, though. That sigh, a simple sound of longing, became the bridge to something else. As the night wore on, and the group of friends slowly dwindled down to just Jackson and Ella, their usual teasing banter shifted. The air grew heavier, more charged. One small touch of his fingers brushing hers, and the familiar electric heat between them ignited once again. He turned toward her, his lips brushing hers slowly at first, as if savoring the moment, a reminder that no matter how many times they'd kissed, each one still felt like the very first. In that moment, in the calm after the storm of his gaming world, Ella realized that her feelings for Jackson had grown. She had found something even bigger than the first crush she'd felt, the feeling of truly belonging. Not just with him, but within herself, with him by her side. A few years later, everything had changed. The gaming sessions, the late-night phone calls, the wild kisses in quiet corners of school, those moments had become memories. But when Ella walked into the coffee shop one Saturday morning and saw Jackson standing behind the counter, everything felt just like it had when they were 16. His smile was still the same, his eyes still sparked with that familiar intensity. "Hey, still the best Fortnite player around?" Ella teased, sitting at the counter. Of course, Jackson grinned, his fingers brushing hers as he handed her a coffee. "But I'm even better at making you smile." She smiled back, feeling that familiar flutter in her stomach. And when he leaned in, brushing his lips against hers, it wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise. Their love had grown, matured, but the butterflies, they were still there. No matter how much time passed, no matter how far they went in life, Ella would always have that feeling when Jackson kissed her. The world could change, but those first moments, the thrill, the uncertainty, the electric connection, would stay with her forever. If you love stories that stick with you like old friends, go ahead and like, subscribe, and share to keep them coming. This is Everlore Diaries, where every story leaves its mark.